Go, Pit Danny with First Blood. Good morning, sunshine. How you doing? All right, and it is Firearms Friday. Let's go ahead and kick this one off. That's the wrong button. All right. Good morning, guys. Good morning. Oh, I gotta look at different ways to manage the equipment in here. I might have to get one of them down drop arms for this microphone and get it. Yeah, because it's this little. I just don't know that little tripod is good enough for me. It's a little too short. I need to get this because really I need the microphone. I should have the microphone closer to my face. This will make for much better sound. But I got a short. We're still getting this. We're still getting this place put together, right? That would be. Do I have the old counter up there? I do. There we go. I don't think I've got the buttons to operate the counter anymore. Have to work on that. So good morning. I see Pit Daddy's with us. I see His Majesty's joined us. Uncle Steve. There's Fish and Golf, and Trish has joined us this morning. So today, I've got a couple of DGUs, assuming we get to them. But I did notice, but there's a story I want to talk about regarding the VA, Veterans Affairs, and firearms, specifically 2A rights. So we'll get to that in just a second. I did notice that there just are not as many stories this week, DGUs, and maybe there's some that I missed out there, but there's a couple of particular places that I look, and they were just a little thinner than usual this week. My first go-to was actually they only had two that we haven't already covered within the last month or so. And I'm curious as to what's happening, and I think it's actually anecdotally just at a cursory guess, basically, without a chance to dig too deep into the data. I suspect that a recent drop-off in notable armed self-defense occurrences is actually indirectly, or at least peripherally, related to the Joe Biden's administration and the resultant rise in crime. Quite simply, more people are carrying, and in places like Georgia, right, we're up to 20. I think we're up to 20, either 27 or 28 states now that have gone to constitutional carry. So in theory, in the constitutional carry states, you don't need a license to carry open or concealed. And in Georgia, especially the further out of the city you get, I'm noticing more and more people open carrying. Before I closed up doing the real estate shoots, and I spent a lot of time in Atlanta shooting, apartment buildings and stuff. I have also recently noticed a pretty a pretty heartening uptick in young. This is a very specific demographic in Atlanta that I was noticing because it does my heart good. Young, well-dressed, well-groomed black men open carrying on their hip in professional attire, like going about their business doing jobs with a little Beretta strapped on their hip. I like to see that. That's in a place like Atlanta, Georgia. That's freaking awesome to see, because we can look at the cities that have blue leadership, like Atlanta, right? Georgia is a deep red state. Atlanta, Georgia is not. It's like we all often say, there are no blue states, only red states with blue cancer, right? Go to California, get outside of LA, go talk to some farmers about some politics, see how they feel about the idea of getting rid of the electoral college in a state where previously the denizens of places like Los Angeles have, I shit you not, voted to reroute the water away from farmers so that they would have enough water for luxury expenditures, like, you know, your infinity pools and your hot tubs and your hot showers, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, go talk to some farmers in California about how they want to vote. But when you start seeing young black men in professional attire, you know, clearly going about their day, doing their business, stop and say hi, talk to them, give them some encouragement and that kind of thing. You see them wearing that pistol on the hip, buddy. They are doing the Lord's work, and they're doing a better job of it than any cop out there is doing. So now the story about the VA. We have briefly touched on this on previous episodes of Firearms Friday, but it's probably been 2 years since I've talked about it or even really thought about it. But it is definitely worth discussing, and it's important to understand. The VA is in part a medical facility that employs medical professionals. And now I have been very generous with my conversations about the VA. And it took more than 10 years after I got out of the Army to get my full benefits package from the VA. And for those of you veterans out there, and in particular, I'm talking to the younger veterans right now. You know, I see you there, old man, Sergeant Major, Uncle Steve, Danny. You guys, I know you've dealt with them, and I know you know some of this. But for the younger veterans who hear this, I want you to understand something. It's referred to as filing for disability. Now, not every veteran that comes out of the military, that comes out of the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, but I repeat myself, you know, because the Marine Corps is a department of the Navy, you know, the men's department. Anyway, I'm sorry, Uncle Steve, I couldn't resist. Anyway, but for you younger veterans that hear this, it is referred to as filing for disability or filing a disability claim. That word claim, here's what I want you to understand. If you have to deal with the VA, if you have to file that claim, it is an adversarial system. What you are doing when you file a claim with Veterans Affairs for the benefits that were guaranteed to you as a part of the compensation package that you signed a contract for of voluntary employment when you enlisted into the United States military. What you are doing technically is you are filing a lawsuit against the federal government. And they are not technically, but actually employing the adversarial position of preventing you from receiving the benefits that you're owed. Now, a lot of what I just said is assuming you are actually owed benefits. Like I said, we don't all come out broken and busted, right? But, you know, get blown up 3 or 4 times and you know, shit happens. You have to tote one of these things around so that you can hear. But yeah. So I want y'all to understand that. Now, part of that, because they are an agent of the an agency of the government, a government which has clearly been compromised, has clearly been infected with leftist, the leftist propagandized psychopathy, which includes gun control. The VA has a policy for certain veterans based on various mental illnesses that you can acquire related to PTSD, etc. The VA has the legal authority to declare a person incompetent. And if they can get you on anything as simple as you're bad at managing your own finances, they can use that to argue, hey, we're going to step in and manage your finances for you. And oh, by the way, that means that you are sufficiently mentally deficient that you no longer have the right to keep and bear arms. And the VA is bad about when they can pull that, when they can make the argument and disarm a veteran in the course of the function. They're notorious about never letting it go. So that veteran has just been disarmed, just had his rights taken away from him for the rest of his life. Now, there is a new law that has. I should have had the law pulled up separately. Okay, I'm gonna do it like this. Let me try and hide this bit. Okay, let's read this part. For years, the VA's policy has been to notify the NICS system if a veteran or beneficiary relies on a fiduciary to manage their benefits and financial affairs. So, see, if you get, you know, little old, little senile, you know, just that, or for any reason, right? I'm in my 40s. I don't have applesauce for brains like the president. I'm doing all right. What if I hire a manager because, you know what, I've got a pile of money and I don't know anything about investing. So, hey, I'll pay you to make me money. That can be interpreted within the confines of this. Now that's a bit of a stretch. I'll be fair. That one is a bit of a stretch. Uncle Steve says the VA is a place to park Democratic voters. Man, that's cold-blooded. That's cold-blooded, Uncle Steve. That's a dark way to refer to our fallen brothers and sisters being walked off the back of a C-130. But anyway, I digress. So, the VA reasons that reliance on a fiduciary indicates a beneficiary is mentally incompetent. Federal law states firearms dealers receive a deny message if an NCIS check for a potential buyer determines the buyer has been adjudicated as mental defective. See, what's happening there is Sergeant Major says fiduciaries are an important protection against. There needs to be more sentence there, Dad, because a fiduciary is an important protection against a lot of things. If you hire an investor, if you hire a broker to manage your investment, your portfolio, that is. Uncle Steve says, know the workers. Yeah. There you go. Dad says against abuse. But if you have an insurance policy, that policy was written by an agent. That agent legally is a fiduciary. If you bought a house, your mortgage has an originator. That originator is a fiduciary, right? If you have a stockbroker, that stockbroker is a fiduciary. That what that word means is not just that they have license, they have a state license to work with money, and in particular, you know, when you watch, you go and watch some French show like, I don't know, the Brushfire Mind, with some, you know, nut that talks about things he probably doesn't know as much about as he'd like you to think he does. And let's say I get off on a rant about Bitcoin. I actually know quite a bit about Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is money. Bitcoin is complicated. And there's no mechanism for you to verify other than you going and doing the research or finding an actual licensed fiduciary to engage that conversation with, of you knowing whether or not I know what the hell I'm talking about. As a fiduciary, someone licensed to discuss those matters, you actually bear a very substantial and significant risk attached to any advice you give. Now, this is why you'll hear people who are not licensed financial advisors or fiduciaries, they'll give the disclaimer, you know, hey, I noticed this trend in real estate recently, talking to several real estate agents. Now, this is not financial advice because I am not a financial advisor. And then I'll talk about the trend, right? It's just a thing that I noticed and I thought was interesting. I don't know enough about it to tell you to do something with it and make money off of it or lose money off it or blah, 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 blah. And as not a licensed fiduciary, I can get myself in trouble, get sued, and maybe lose that lawsuit and end up paying somebody the money they lost on my advice if I didn't make it clear that, hey, I'm just thinking out loud, talking about stuff. I am not qualified to give you financial advice. The fiduciary, however, if he screws it up, he loses his license, which means he loses his job. And that's, and then, of course, can also be sued for the damages related to that. But yeah, to say that the VA's policy, that just the language there is dangerous. It's very serious, because it says the VA's policy has been to notify the NICS system if a veteran or beneficiary relies on a fiduciary to manage their benefits and financial affairs. Your financial affairs include: do you have a mortgage? Do you have a stockbroker? Do you have an insurance policy? Do you have car insurance? Do you have God, what do they call it? Both of mine are paid off. Oh, a fucking loan. Did you borrow money to buy your car? A car note. Jesus, I haven't had a car note in like 7, 8 years. Anyway. But technically, that the way the rule's written, if you are a veteran, yeah, see, Dad, funny story. So technically, if you're a veteran, the way that language reads is, if you're a veteran and have seen money in your life, we can just arbitrarily decide to remove your Second Amendment rights. Dad asks the question, what about doctor-patient confidentiality? Yeah, so interesting story. If you go to the VA or any doctor's office, hospital, etc., You deal with a doctor briefly, and how many other people? And of those, how many other people? How many of them are doctors? Well, apart from the one doctor you see, if you even see a doctor, not like an LPN or something, or LNP, whatever, a nurse, they're not even medical professionals outside of the doctor and the nurse, right? You're dealing with administrators. What does doctor-patient confidentiality do there? Now, HIPAA is a thing. But yeah, doctor-patient confidentiality. Ooh. Let me throw you this real quick. The correct answer to the question, and I don't care who asks it. I don't care if it's a police officer. I don't care if it's your congressman. I don't care if it's your commanding officer at your military unit, or your doctor. I don't care. I don't care. Right. Unless you're having a conversation with a close personal friend with whom you share real trust, and that's just the thing you want to talk about. The answer to the question, do you own firearms or do you have guns at home? The answer to that question is never yes or no. The answer to that question is always go fuck yourself. That is the answer to that question every single time. Not yes, not no. GFY. So, for years, the VA's policy has been to notify the NICS system if the veteran or beneficiary relies on a fiduciary to manage their benefits and financial affairs. Congressional Republicans have introduced several bills to block the VA from reporting to NICS when a veteran relies on the assistance of a fiduciary. Out of concern, those veterans could be barred access to firearms as a result. In May, the Republican-led House Veterans Affairs Committee advanced a bill titled the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act to reverse this VA policy on NICS reporting. The bill states the VA may only report a veteran or VA beneficiary to NICS after a judicial authority determines that person is a danger to themselves or others. See, so until this bill, and this actually touches on the Chevron deference case that passed recently. Until this bill, you're looking at the VA essentially interpreting law to determine its own rules and then being the arbiter of law which it itself has written. And the House Republicans have said, no. Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act. Now, I wish this story was all good news. We lost the last half of the show yesterday because we actually had a brownout over here. So I was like mid-sentence and the power went out just long enough to kill the show. But part of what I was getting to talk about yesterday with the SAVE Act, the bill that just passed the House that's supposed to require proof of citizenship for a person to vote. One of the things that I wanted to talk about with that applies here as well. Because this is an act. This is an act of Congress. It's gonna, it has to go through. It still has to go through the Senate, be signed by the president. I appreciate in theory that these Republicans that are in control of the House, but barely, are doing things that are important and need to get done. But I want to make it clear, I want to make sure that y'all understand they are not actually doing things and getting the things done, because what they're doing is they are making the representation of doing things. They are play acting, doing the thing at a time when they know that anything they get through the House and into the Senate will die on the floor in the Senate. And if it doesn't, right, protecting the American citizen from fraudulent voters, from the votes of hostile foreign agents, protecting veterans, the Second Amendment rights of veterans, right? Anything that the House appears to do right, remember, part of their decision-making process to even pursue that activity began with the clear understanding that the Democrats control the Senate. They will kill it on the floor before it gets to the president. And even if we manage to force it through those sons of whores, Mr. Applesauce for brains will veto it when it gets there. So it's pure virtue signaling. Now, in their defense, I will say this in their defense, and this is part of the game of politics. They are accomplishing two valuable things by pushing these bills forward. This is true with the SAVE Act. This is true with the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act. Even though they know it's going to get voted down, and they're not actually accomplishing anything with respect to the bill itself, these are the two things they're accomplishing. The bill has been written, and now it exists, which means that no matter what happens to it, die on the floor, vetoed on the president's desk, it can be amended, it can be updated, and it can be reintroduced quickly. So it's incredibly important. Waller says virtue signaling equals normalizing. Yes, and I hate to admit it, but this is a lesson that we can learn from the Democrats. The pressure game, and that's what I'm getting at. Virtue signaling equals normalizing, right? There are doctors cutting perfectly healthy genitalia off of children right now because you watched Will and Grace in the 90s. That is how this works. That is how they operate. So there's that piece. And then the other piece of it is they just made these Democrats, like with the SAVE Act in particular, all but 5 of them, so 198 Democrats signed a piece of paper that says, no, I want to prevent people from having to prove their citizenship before they vote. I don't see the voting record on this one. I don't think this one's okay. Let me back up. They haven't passed this bill yet. The bill is in progress, and the story here has to do with the hearing being had on the bill, so that we don't have the voting record on this bill yet. Waller is correct. For a cigarette, yes, in Europe. Nothing particularly interesting or offensive at all about it. Anyway, damn it, Waller. Oh, they made 198 Democrats sign a piece of paper that says this is what we believe. And what we believe is that non-citizens should be allowed to vote. Right. And I started to mention this yesterday, and I don't want to rehash what I was going to cover yesterday too much, but think back to 2020. 2020 was a census year, right? They're coming around, they're asking us all, how many people in the house. By the way, when the census people come and knock on the door, the answer to the question, the only answer that they get is there are X number of people in this house. When they start asking you about how many toilets, how much this, how many that, how much food do you buy, et cetera, et cetera. No. There are X people in this house. Have a nice day. The Constitution requires that the people be counted for the purpose of apportionment. Everything else on the census is a GFY answer. There are X people in this house. You may leave now. Well, I need to ask about, no. There are X people in this house, and now you are trespassing. Well, I need to ask you about, no. There are X people in this house, and I'm calling the police. You will be escorted away, and I will prosecute you to the greatest extent of the law. That's where we're at. Answer that question and be done with them. Because in 2020, the Democrats fought tooth and nail to prevent the question of citizenship from being attached to the census. Precisely because if you attach the question of citizenship to the census, California loses a quarter of their electoral college seats. California loses a quarter of their House of Representatives reps, of their congressional representatives. New York loses, I think, 3. Texas loses a couple, but most of us don't lose any. Georgia might lose 1, maybe. Florida probably loses 2 for the Cubans. But if you attach the question of citizenship to the census, California is basically gutted politically, and that's why the Democrats fought so hard on that one. So the big part of this, the part of the story that got my interest that I want to share with you, and I know there was a lot of setup and a lot of bitching, but I mean, I just cannot stress enough how psychotically unjust and intolerably unacceptable it is that under Chevron deference, under the theory of Chevron deference, the VA has essentially the power to simply arbitrarily remove your firearms from veterans. And then the VA sends their representative, the deputy of Veterans Affairs, Kevin Friel, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, goes to the Senate hearing to discuss the matter. And I want you to hear what he had to say.
VA's testimony stated that if the Veterans Second Amendment Restoration Act is signed into law, and this is even more troubling, the VA could not comply because the VA states the Department of Justice, an executive branch agency, affirmed VA's interpretation of the Brady Act. So, is it the VA's position that the VA will not comply with an act of Congress based on another agency's interpretation of the law?
So the VA has always works to comply with all laws. We complied with the Brady Handgun Act when it was in effect. The law.
So again, is the VA's position, because based on the statement they could not comply with the Restoration Act, the Veterans Second Amendment Restoration Act, is it your position that you will not comply with an act of law passed by Congress?
Yes, sir. I guess based off of what you have in testimony, yes, sir.
That you would not comply?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm glad everybody hears that on the record, that the VA is going to refuse to comply with, regardless of what we actually pass here, including questions that Representative Self was just asking in view of the Chevron Act being passed. Mr. Chair, I have just a couple more questions, but I think that Mr. Friel has incriminated himself and the VA that they're going to have complete disregard for what we're going to do anyway. So
Mr. Friel, you're very well aware of how you just answered the congressman's question, correct?
Sir, as I said, it's in our testimony that we would have trouble complying with that law. As I said,
Mr. Friel, you're very well aware of how you answered the congressman's question.
Yes, sir.
And Luttrell tried. He tried, man. He tried hard to give it back to him. He tried so hard to help him. You know, what's the first rule of holes, gentlemen? Once you're in one, you stop digging. Poor Friel here, he just put the VA on the hook. He just said, we as an agency will not comply with an act of Congress. And he went so far as to say that because we feel that because the Department of Justice, which is another branch of the administration, and I know that's confusing because the Department of Justice has a lot of judges in it. It sounds like it should be part of the judicial branch, but it's not. It's a law enforcement agency. It's part of the administrative branch. I'm sorry, it's part of the executive branch. It's part of the administration of the executive branch. But because the Department of Justice affirmed that the VA's interpretation of the unconstitutional Brady Act was correct, that this guy, Mr. Friel, and the Department of Veterans Affairs generally, for whom he is speaking as the qualified agent, they believe that through all of that, and in accordance with Chevron deference, which I might remind you was just not gutted, not completely obliterated, leaving its tattered husk in the wake of grand destruction. No, literally and entirely overturned, gone, no longer at question, no longer a question at issue. Chevron deference is gone. But Mr. Friel thinks that because an executive branch agency said it, that it trumps the law, and the VA can just arbitrarily continue to remove veterans' firearms from them. Waller said, and yeah, okay, kudos to Friel for being honest. Fair enough. Waller says, I think he did well in affirming the testimony of the VA and didn't work to obfuscate. In fact, I might even go so far as to say, for Mr. Friel, he might actually be a rock rib conservative that's going out of his way to say, hey, I'm not saying that this is my idea, and I'm sure as hell not saying it's a good idea. I'm saying that it's my job as the representative from the VA to tell you that the VA said you can go fuck yourself, Congress. And, that is probably the most generous interpretation we can give this poor young man. And I hope that that's what's happening, is he's coming here to say, hey, Congress, I want you to know that the VA is planning to screw your veterans some more. And I'm trying to say that as politically as possible. As I'm trying to say that in such a way that I don't lose my job for letting the bag out of the cat. Thank you very kindly. So that's where we're at right now. We're like just over 100 days away from an election. And you've all heard this 1,000 times before. This is the most important election, if not the most important election of your life, of our lives. This is the most important election ever. And it gets tired, right? You get tired of hearing it because you hear it every election cycle. This is the most important election ever. Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure, whatever. Whatever. Except here's the thing. It is the most important election ever. But that's another part of the problem. The last election was the most important election ever. Until this one, because this one hadn't happened yet. The election before that was the most important election ever. Until the one after it, because the one after it hadn't happened yet. Remember the other day, right before the debates, I did a show where I brought up the numbers, and Donald Trump is by the numbers the most successful president in history. Okay, not in history. I only did the last 100 years worth of presidents, but I showed clearly, like there were no presidents who left with damn it, I forget which of the metrics was the exception, the outlier. But you'd have basically we looked at the whole list, and there was a president here or there that improved the economic situation by leaving office with a lower unemployment rate that he came in with, or during his term he improved the situation with inflation. He improved the inflation rate before he left office, or he cut taxes, right, and had a positive effect on the economy there. Right? And you can show one or two little wins like that per president, but with the exception of Donald Trump, there are none who left office without a new war, or who improved more than one or two of the long list of metrics that I supplied for the argument. The clear numeric victory on improved fuel costs, improved quality of life, improved cost of living, improved unemployment numbers, improved economy, improved foreign relations, no new wars, new peace deals in the Middle East, new peace talks with North Korea, normalizing relations with Russia. Russia didn't take any new land. I mean, the numbers are just there. So Trump versus Clinton was the most important election ever. We saw what the Trump administration was like. Everybody made more money and everything cost less money. No new wars, right? Cheap gas and world peace. The fuck you want? Cheap gas and world peace. What else can you want? Right? And then that's what we got instead of whatever we would have gotten out of Hillary. Well, now Biden has had his 4 years, and now you know what you would have gotten out of Hillary. More Russian aggression, shut down Keystone XL pipeline, leading to extraordinarily inflated gas prices, leading to extraordinarily inflated every other prices. You've seen essentially foreign policy, domestic, economic disaster, and oh, by the way, all insult to injury coupled with moral degradation and decay, while the U.S. government itself is directly involved and taxpayer subsidizing human trafficking and child sex slave trade. That's what's going on at the border. Make no mistake. An insecure border, especially where these criminal aliens are being given taxpayer-funded benefits, cell phones, etc. That is the Biden administration subsidizing human trafficking and doing it for profit. That's why the SAVE Act will be vetoed. That's why the citizenship question wasn't on the census. And I hope I'm making the point clearly. Every election is the most important election ever, because in every election, you're choosing between a conservative who at best will slow down the train, with the exception of Donald Trump, who actually made progress, who actually improved the nation, who actually improved the lives of the citizens. Right? Before him, all you got, Reagan pushed the problems back a little bit, but not nearly to the degree that Trump did. But outside of Trump and Reagan, you put a Republican in the White House to slow down the train. And if you get a Democrat, They are there to set the engine on fire to push it faster over the cliff. So every election is the most important election because if you get a Democrat in the White House, they will make everything worse. It's not because they're bad at what they do. Democrats don't fuck everything up because they're bad at everything they do. Oh no, Adamas, I didn't have to forget about the riots. The Democrats have done so much damage that the riots are barely even worth mentioning. The riots only did about $3 billion worth of damage. That's hardly a drop in the bucket. That's hardly a drop in the bucket. Trump sped everything up by far. You I see. You're not talking about the actual riots. You're not talking about federal buildings being burned down, police officers being murdered, political opponents being murdered in the street. I see. You're not talking about protesters that set the church on fire, burned down police stations. Nah. Yeah. Yoel Adamas. Yeah, you're adorable. You can keep watching if you want, but I'm done commenting on you because both sides are the same. Do different hands. No, they're not. If you believe that, no. If you believe that, you don't have an intelligible frame of reference. Rod says half measures provide hope, but not all that is required. That is correct. Half measures are unsustainable, and that is a large part of the problem. Waller gives us Trump understood the value of negotiating from a position of strength. Correct. Career politicians don't understand that concept because they're never in a position of strength. Incorrect. Career Republicans don't understand that concept because they're never in a position of strength. Career Democrats are always working from a position of strength. Career Democrats, that's a big part of what's happening now across the country. Trump supporters don't riot. They don't set buildings on fire. They don't just randomly murder people, and they're not throwing fire bombs into police stations. They're not throwing Molotov cocktails into police cars with police in them. They're not smashing in windows and murdering people. They just, when we show up and do a protest, it's a protest, right? You don't get violence at Trump rally gatherings unless your Black Bloc, your BLM, your Antifa guys show up and start an attack. So the problem there is that every position a Democrat takes comes with the implied threat: I will send my Gestapo to burn your city down. Right? Atlanta, we had the ballad of Rayshard Brooks, young black guy, drunk, trashed out of his mind. Just pulled up into a Wendy's parking lot. It pulled up to a drive-through and fell asleep in the drive-through, wouldn't move. So Wendy's called the police. The police got him pulled over into the parking lot. They checked him out. They were going to arrest him for DUI, and then he tried to steal one of their weapons, and he tried to murder a police officer and got himself dead for his effort. And the result, BLM set up an autonomous zone around the Wendy's and burned it to the ground. Just burned it slap to the ground. When Ashley Babbitt was murdered by a police officer on January 6th, did the far right MAGA Republicans go and burn that building to the ground? Fuck no. No, we didn't. So, I mean, it really is that simple. You had so Yoel Adamus is attempting to conflate the activity of a lawful assembly assembling for the purpose to petition the government for redress of grievances, trying to conflate that with burning down fast food restaurants and federal buildings and churches. So there you go. And that, well, I suspected this was a risk given the topic. I mean, obviously, if we're going to be talking about veterans and gun control, it's going to take up a lot of my attention because these are two things that are very near and dear to my heart. So I'm gonna give you. Let's see if we can't get one DGU in here and then call it a day. I just got my pickup truck back out of the shop yesterday, which means I need to go to the dump. So that's my morning. Yay! All right, so let's see what we got here. KTLA. What the hell? No headline? Okay. All right, you do you, boo. A shooting investigation is underway in the San Fernando Valley, neighborhood of Valley Village, after a homeowner reportedly shot an intruder Monday, and police were searching for 2 additional burglary suspects. Authorities confirmed to KTLA. Okay. Officers with the Los Angeles Police Department responded to reports of the shooting in the 11,600 block of Addison Street near Colfax Boulevard just after 3 p.m. Details are limited, and it's unclear exactly how the shooting unfolded. But preliminary reports by police suggest that at least one person was shot and another ran off as they were attempting to enter a residence in the area. Thank you for that, Waller. Details are limited, and it's unclear exactly how the shooting unfolded, but preliminary reports by police suggest that at least one person was shot and another ran off as they were attempting to enter a residence in the area. 2 suspects entered a residence with an occupant inside. LAPD Captain Kelly Muniz said that occupant armed himself with a handgun and fired at the potential burglars that were inside of his home. LAPD told KTLA that a male, only described as approximately 25 years old, suffering from a gunshot wound, who was conscious and breathing, was taken to a nearby hospital for treatment. The homeowner, who sustained unknown injuries during the incident, was also taken to the hospital. LA police on the scene of the shooting in the San Fernando Valley neighborhood of Valley Village. Okay. Aerial footage of the scene captured by Sky 5 showed a heavy presence of officers. Yeah, that looks like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And there's probably one right there, so we got 10. That a work van probably. So 10 or 11 officers, 10 or 11 cars. Heavy police presence and roughly 3-block perimeter had been cordoned off while police searched for another suspect. Oh, so there's okay, so you got another couple of cop cars over there. Okay, big perimeter, got it. 3 blocks. Getaway driver who may have abandoned the vehicle at the sound of gunfire. A black sedan was also seen sitting in the intersection, though it is unknown if that was a suspect vehicle involved in the incident. Dozens of children at a church and school across the street were placed on lockdown as authorities went door to door, warning residents and others to keep their doors locked, windows down, and to stay inside. For the time being, people are increasing patrols in the area. The 2 suspects remain outstanding. So, wow. You got, apparently there's no deaths in that situation. Sounds like a clean shoot, except being LA, I'm a little surprised to see that they didn't list the home invader that went to the hospital as a victim. Rod says home invasions create shovel-ready jobs. Yeah, whenever my wife asks for help, I always ask her, do you need pistol help or shovel help? So this one right here, man, that sounds like a pretty clear-cut case of self-defense. Except as I understand it, California just doesn't have castle doctrine to work with. I don't know what else to say about this one. Except for I hope they catch the bad guys. LAPD told KTLA that a male, only described as approximately 25 years old, suffering from a gunshot wound, who was conscious and breathing, was taken to a nearby hospital for treatment. So, yeah, we can extrapolate from the fact that there's not a description of the assailant. Clearly not a white guy. I mean, obviously, that would have the headline would be white man attacks or some shit like that. So there you go. Okay, we'll do one more since that one kind of felt like a bust because the bad guys got away. So Chicago gas station shootout. Oh, here we go. Chicago. You know, I think I read a headline that there were 109 shootings and 19 deaths in Chicago last weekend. So yeah, part of today's safety brief is keep calm and carry one. Waller says California has castle. Oh, well, good for them. Concealed carry license holder engaged in a self-defense shooting at an Inglewood gas station in Chicago during injuring an assailant. The incident highlights the importance of concealed carry and being in control over one's safety. It also highlights, because the assailant was only injured, it highlights the need for judicial marksmanship. So, going back to the range, buddy, and get good. Get good! So, early Saturday morning, a concealed carry license holder who was involved in a self-defense shooting at a Southside gas station in Chicago's Inglewood neighborhood. The incident unfolded around 1:39 a.m. in the 200 block of West 63rd Street. It's 1:39 in the morning, right? Y'all. I mean, I know I've made reference to the How I Met Your Mother quip, but you know, okay, so it's not 2 o'clock yet, but really, guys, what good is going to happen to you out in the world after 1 o'clock in the morning? Go home, go to bed. The incident unfolded around 1:39 in the morning. According to Chicago police, a 36-year-old man retrieved a firearm from his vehicle during an argument and opened fire on a 49-year-old man. The 49-year-old, who was licensed to carry a concealed firearm, returned fire, striking the assailant in the arm. Okay. This is a little touchy. So you conceal carry. You have found yourself in an argument with someone who is not likely to be described in the newspaper article about the incident that's about to occur. You're in an argument with this person, and they return to their vehicle to get something. On their way. On the way to the vehicle. That is when you draw your weapon. You don't brandish it. You don't wave it at them. You don't point it at them. But what I don't want is for you to be the one who is fumbling trying to pull your weapon after they have already aimed and fired at you. This is not legal advice. This is tactical advice. You cannot outdraw someone who's got the drop on you. Plain and simple. Okay. Let me address something real quick. Ewell Adamus says no freedom of speech here, LOL. Okay. You're a fucking moron. You're running your mouth, you're trolling, you're trying to get a reaction. Here's your reaction. You've said, I haven't stopped you from saying anything. I just don't care to listen to you. And the only reason I'm even addressing it is because you've made the no freedom of speech here comment. It's not complicated, sunshine. You have the freedom of speech, but you're the sort of fucking sociopathic communist who thinks that your freedom to speak implies my obligation to listen. I am perfectly free, as are you, to ignore speech that doesn't interest me. Yes, people can talk without starting a gunfight. In fact, that's why we talk. That is the absolute preference. I don't think you understand what we're talking about here. And it's okay. I got you. You're a big fan of Marx. You think you know what words mean, and you know that's okay. You just need to read more. I promise, sweetheart, you can read yourself out of your ignorance. Can't fix stupid, but you can read yourself out of your ignorance. Now I'll give you a generous interpretation that what you are suggesting here is that the people involved in this incident, the 36-year-old man retrieved a firearm from his vehicle, is the child. And yeah, I'll grant you that, yeah, that is childish activity. It's activity so childish that I remain unsurprised that there's no description of this person who was clearly seen by the person writing the article. But here's the thing. If you've never been charged by a young boy carrying a hand grenade, you may not understand this. Waller says shootouts starting without words are premeditated murder. Oh, I might have to think about that one for a minute to think about whether or not I can argue with that. I might have to give you that one, Waller. That's solid. So, but it is time to go ahead and put a pin in this one. And you know, Adamus, I'll give you. I'm gonna be charitable to how much you've aggravated me with your trolling, and I'm going to assume that what's really happening here is your refusal to complete thoughts or sentences has led me to misunderstand your meaning, and perhaps you were trying to say something useful and productive and would have done so if you would just slow down for a moment and complete a thought. And you know, hey, I wish you the best of luck with that in your future endeavors. Good for you. It is Friday. It means we're going into the weekend. The most important thing you can do for your safety is to exercise your right to keep and bear arms. Keep calm and carry one. Y'all be safe out there this weekend. I don't think there's anything super special going on this particular weekend. We appear to have survived the 4th with 10 and 10 all intact, and that's good math right there. So don't drive drink, don't fry bacon naked, and we love you. Be safe, and we will see you on Monday. Hey, Waller, you said you're carrying a cold one this weekend. Do you need a hand? I mean, those bodies can get heavy, brother.